Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Suzio, thank you for your kind words and your direction in our caucus. Mr. President, this is our budget that you have heard about today. And these choices in our budget were not easy choices. We had a budget originally that adopted the savings that Governor Malloy had placed forth, $1.5 billion roughly over the 2 years. And then we were hit with a $1.8 billion additional deficit. And the question is, how do you deal with that? And we looked at it and said, what direction are we going in? And we sat down and we made a number of changes. We did make more cuts to social services. We made more cuts, some to municipalities, small as it may be, and phased them out over 10 years. But then you get down to harder choices. And you realize that you need to make structural changes that save in 2 years X, but by 5 and 10 years, 10, 20 times X. Because when we do budgets, we shouldn't be doing them for elections. We should be doing them for generations. We need to set a framework and a road for future legislators to say, this is the path to prosperity. Some have argued that the budget we're producing here today, that we put a press conference, seems like a couple days ago, but was this morning, was a surprise. Hogwash. Wasn't a surprise. We did a line-by-line budget, balanced, vetted, and then when the new numbers came out, we did a second line-by-line budget, vetted and balanced. And as we stand here or are here in the chamber, we are the only caucus to have a line-by-line, vetted, balanced budget. End of story. End of story. The governor's got a budget, line by line and balanced. I don't think it's got wide support on either side of the aisle or either chamber. But that's what we put forth. And that budget's been on our website, and that budget's been distributed to the leadership in this building. And many people have had this budget for a long time. We did a small tweak the other day in direct response to two issues, one of which was the governor saying, I don't think you could achieve this savings. We looked at it and said, okay, we think we can, but arguably we can't. We'll make that change. And we made another change that we think, in hindsight, should have been changed to help businesses. But we updated that. What we have to talk about is moving the state forward. We have one solemn obligation to the constituency and the state of Connecticut every 2 years, and that's to pass a budget. And an obligation that we do it as quickly as possible. We've put it out there. It's going to be easy for people to sit on the sideline and throw rocks, especially when they don't have a budget that you could look at. I have constantly said, I am not going to negotiate with ghosts. I am not going to negotiate with a budget that I don't know what it does. If you're not going to give me line-by-line budget, you're going to do concepts, how can I possibly have a conversation with you? How can I possibly say, I don't like line 2 or line 5? I've got to say, I don't even know what that means. We have a greater obligation to this state. We are in survival mode. Our bonding has gone down. Our population has gone down. Whether people like to admit it or not, this is a simple fact. The wealthy are leaving the state. You don't believe it? Let's talk numbers. The top 15 taxpayers, let's say top 100, because I want to be absolutely certain about my numbers. The top 100 taxpayers 6 years ago paid $600 million to this state. 4 years ago, it went down to $450 million to this state. Currently, it's projected to be $253 million. How do you ever get that money back? That $400 million is $800 million over the 2 years. How do you get that money back? This is a problem running down into. And if those numbers were up, we'd be able to fund everything we wanted to. Social services, education, special needs, drug rehab. But we can't do it because we're on a wrong path. And I will say this, it's not a shocker. We have talked about a wrong path for a while. We have suggested straightening it out. The numbers in this chamber and the numbers down in the House prohibited us from having that conversation. 1 year ago today, we'll say 1 year ago and about 1 year ago today, there were budget negotiations. Republicans were not allowed in the room. Not allowed in the room. We're in the room now. It's 18-18. And downstairs they're off by 4. That's not by accident. This state's heading down the wrong direction. We need to work together, not against, not ships in the night. We need to work together. We put forth a budget. We accept criticism. We accept constructive additions and subtractions of conversations when you have a document for which you can have those conversations about. Let's talk a little bit about the union concessions. Yes, we have more union concessions than the governor does. No question about it. There's a miscommunication out there indicating that we, Senate Republicans, are dismantling collective bargaining. That is not accurate. In fact, that is a lie. We are not. All the rights, privileges, and collective bargaining remain, and you cannot, under federal law, get rid of collective bargaining. What we have said, like many other states, 47 of the 50 states say that pensions will be controlled by statute, not by collective bargaining. And what we said is we're going to have parameters on pensions. Retirement. All we're saying, let's equalize the playing field. The state workers are hard, dedicated folks who pay taxes. Hard, dedicated people. They work extraordinarily hard, and they're entitled to every benefit for which they are receiving. No doubt about it. But the question is, are we sustainable? I would suggest, had we made the changes years ago to the budget and made the cuts we had to make, we would not be in a position that we are today with such a deficit that we have to look at a whole different set of numbers and a whole different set of methodology to achieve a result. But we are where we are. We're saying the local unions. I've heard people say this affects firemen, policemen, and teachers. Rubbish. It does not. It does not. This is about 75% of the state employees pay 2% towards their pension on a defined benefit. It's a great deal. I don't begrudge them for having it. I'm saying, or we're saying in a budget, we just need to change that. The average is 7. We need to change that. After 2022 is what our proposal says, how we change it. Now, I do congratulate the unions and the governor for putting a hybrid out there. That is a great recognition of a structural change. And in that hybrid, overtime is not included. A great structural change. And within hybrid, you get 6%, 7% if you don't get a return of 6.9. That's a significant change. But we still have an ongoing problem today that has not been addressed in that negotiations. So we need to change the structural methodology. It's not against unions. It's not against collective bargaining. It is the fact that we need to face the reality that the current situation cannot continue. We have seen our neighbors to the north, Rhode Island, with a Democratic governor, do the exact same thing. Some people have quoted by saying a Wisconsin moment. No. Wisconsin did municipal. Wisconsin did a lot more than what this is suggesting. This is suggesting being parity between the private sector and the local unions such that we can survive as a state. Because right now, we are going to be faced with significant problems unless we change. That's what we are proposing to do. Those are the conversations we have to have. They are uncomfortable. They are uncomfortable. But unfortunately, they are necessary. Because if we don't address them, we can't help those who need help. Who need help. I would also add in our budget, we recognize that on the state employees' pay scale, that some folks who get paid higher should pay a higher premium than those folks who are paying $70,000 or less. There should be some sort of sliding scale to bring parity even amongst the union folks so that we can help everybody in this methodology that we're looking at. Our cities need help. Our schools need help. In this budget, and we have the only budget that does this, is look at the court decisions and say we need to change ECS to make it fair. We need to make sure the cities get the money they need to properly educate our kids. There's no greater equalizer among people than education. That's how you get people to grow, get jobs, and succeed in life. Mr. President, this is not a budget that we put forward in a hapstance or as a knee-jerk reaction to a situation. This is a budget that we thought long and hard on. You just can't make a change in the state unless you make significant structural changes. I do appreciate the negotiations between the unions and the governor. When you do the math, it's $186 million. If you do the math in terms of what that change on the union contracts are, it's only $186 million. We could have a policy debate whether we believe that's a fair number or not. I would suggest it has to be higher. That's the reason why we did what we did. We welcome a conversation with the unions. If they look at our budget and say item 2 is not good, but I'll give you a substitute in terms of a number, okay. It's not the item, it's the number. We welcome that conversation. My door is open. I'll talk to anybody at any time about these issues, but we need to confront them. And as Senator Suzio said, this is the budget that has all the factors and structures that say, let's take this budget, let's start to have a conversation. If there are things that there's a strong need to change on the other side of the aisle or from the unions, let's have that conversation. But we have to move forward. We felt it was our obligation to put forth a balanced, vetted, line-by-line, 2-year budget. And we wanted to fill our obligations to the state of Connecticut. Mr. President, with that, it's my understanding